as
Hello
well.
out there on Twitch. Hello out there on Instagram.
Hello. We're going to find a cool Instagram
Okay,
filter.
I play intro song.
Okay. Look, there's our rose petals.
Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Thou art more lovely and more temperate. Rough winds do shake the darling buds of May, and summer's lease hath all too short a date. Sometime too hot the eye of heaven shines, and often is his gold complexion dimmed. And every fair from fair sometime declines,
The
by
shading
chance
on
or nature's
What?
changing course untrimmed. But
it's got
thy
like a soft
eternal
filter.
summer shall
Yeah.
not fade,
Petals.
nor lose possession of that fair thou owest, nor shall death brag thou wanderest in his shade, when in eternal lines to time thou growst. So long as men can breathe or eyes can see, so long lives this, and this gives life to thee.
Poetic justice. You were so new to this life, but goddamn, you got adjusted. I mean, I write poems in these songs dedicated to the fun sex, your natural hair, and your soft skin, and your big ass, and that
Like Michael
sundress.
Ferrara with the live
God,
comment.
what you doing that walk for? They say communication, say relations, I can tell, but I can never right my wrongs unless I write them down for real. P.S. You can get it, you can get it, you can get it, you can get it. And I know just what you want. Poetic justice, put it in a song, alright. You can get it, you can get it.
Hi, welcome to Question Block.
Welcome out there.
Welcome.
VS Audio Designs.
Sweet. Hey. This
cool.
week's theme, the theme of the week, the entire week is and it's Wednesday, so, you know.
Yeah, the theme is poetry.
It's Cunning Linguists.
Oh, Cunning Linguists, famous
Yeah.
poets. So
Who
for all
give
of
us-
you out there who are looking for something to say to your Valentine,
Or just something to say to yourself.
say to yourself to pick yourself up. We're gonna talk about history of some famous romantic poets. So make violence.
Yes.
No, make love. But they are, many of them do have violent backstories, which we'll dig into.
Yeah. Who are you?
Oh, well, we should clarify right up top because
Oh.
some people were confused. We're not going to be reading very many poems. It's not a poetry reading podcast. We're spilling the tea
Yep.
on
Yeah.
these poets. So it's going to be more of like talking about the behind the scenes drama history podcast.
Yeah.
Like violence.
It's like being in a it's like having tea with Oscar Wilde.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh no, we won't talk about the Bible. Where the romantic poets were pretty.
Yeah. No Bible.
What were they? Agnostic, I guess. Atheists. I don't know. They were all about the carnal desires, though. So let's get into it. So who am I? I guess I'm dressed like a romantic.
I mean, who
poet.
are you like? Yes, you are just like a romantic poet. You've got a
I
skull
guess
that you're drinking out of.
Lord Byron was a pretty boy, so I'm
Yes.
kind of Lord Byron-ish right now.
You're drinking out of a skull, and Lord Byron did like to drink out of skulls, actually.
Wait, really?
He really did. When his friend Percy, when his like BFF, FFLL,
Okay.
died, Percy bit Shelley, he wanted his skull, and people were like,
Wait,
because
did Byron drink out of his friend's skull?
he wanted it. People wouldn't give it to him
Okay.
because they were like,
like, no.
yeah, they were like, you're gonna end up drinking out of
You
this,
get hepatitis that way.
or they were. I mean, yeah. But you would have to undo a couple of buttons because Lord Byron.
They like the deep V, the romantic poets, I believe.
Lord Byron basically like that was he was like the one who made
started
the
that
deep
trend.
V. Yeah.
Okay, nice.
I guess we should start off by talking about him, huh?
I just saw this like viral Instagram post about a guy who made a guitar out of his uncle's skeleton, and so like there's like video of him playing. It's like the rib cage is
Okay.
the guitar.
That's
so,
wild.
I
So
suppose he's a
pers-
modern
so,
poet, a modern Byron of our times. Lord Vader way cooler.
Well, Lord Byron actually became a lord when he was like 10 years old. Speaking of the Bible, he was abused by his nanny. She would read him these very intense like Bible verses and like beat the crap out of him.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
But he did become a lord when he was I think like 10 years old, from his uncle like gave him.
He was not castrated. He had mad sex.
He did, but he was very self-conscious about his body because he was born with all these sort of minor little, like he had like a club foot, and he had a caul, which is like a really dope skin shawl. It's like a foreskin of your body.
Like the placenta was still around him or something?
I don't know.
That's
but,
so weird.
A sailor bought it for good luck, and then that sailor drowned.
Yeah. Fun fact, if you were born with extra flaps of skin on you, back in the like late 1800s, they would sell them to people as a good luck charm. And his particular one was sold to a man who then drowned.
Yeah.
So Byron was cursed.
He was cursed, but he was conscious about his body because he had he had a club foot. He was like a little chubby. He
was a little chubby.
But then he was like, I will be the hottest ever to make up for my childhood insecurities. So he like became a swimmer.
Real ugly duckling hair.
Yeah,
He became a swan.
He became a swan.
I read, in the minimal research I did for this particular show, I did read that he was bullied like mercilessly in like British private school, in part because there's a tradition at British private schools.
His friend.
Was
That's
it?
Percy bitch
That's
Shelley.
Percy?
That's Percy.
Oh,
We
I
gonna
thought it
get
was
to
Byron.
Percy. Byron was.
Okay, you
Yeah,
take the lead.
I want you to talk about Percy though,
Okay.
because Percy.
You take the lead.
Percy's
then.
real fun.
Okay, continue.
Byron was actually very like cool in school.
Okay.
He loved animals, and his school banned dogs. They said you couldn't bring your dogs to class. And he was like, that's cool. I'll just bring my bear to class because y'all don't have any rules about bears.
He got a pet bear.
He had a pet bear.
Brought it to class.
I think he had a monkey as well.
And the school was like, we have no rules that cover this. So I
exactly.
guess,
they were like, well, you got us.
That Byron.
Yeah.
He's done it again.
In fact, the word Byronic hero or Byronic protagonist comes from.
What does that refer to?
It basically is like sad. It's like a sad fuckboy.
That's what a Byronic hero is?
Pretty much. It's like, I mean, that's how I think of them. It's like the Adam Drivers.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like every character that Adam Driver has ever played is a Byronic hero.
Great. That's one of those like just phrasing. You're like,
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, Byronic hero. That sounds really
You're like
fascinating.
bionic. You're like a metal. Yeah.
In my head, I'm just like, yeah, okay. Oh yeah,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm just like at the taco truck, and I'm like, it's very Byronic.
It's
Your
very
choice-
Byronic.
Your choice there. Yeah.
This taco's a sad
This taco's
fuckboy.
very Byronic. Yeah. It's one of those words. Bionic.
Bionic
hero.
The Bionic hero. That would be me.
Oh, sad, sexy robot would be a bionic Byronic hero.
Ooh.
So, someday.
Comic coming out in 2022.
Byron didn't write villains? Did he write villains? Is there a Byronic villain?
Yeah. I guess.
sad fuck.
Actually, Byron's doctor. Oh, because Byron was like, he had like a weird, like health thing. Like he was like hypochondriac. So his doctor traveled everywhere with him. John Polidori.
It's cool, right? The two coolest things in literature are both if you show up and you're like, oh, I brought my attorney with me, right? Like in Fear and Loathing, he just brings his attorney everywhere.
Yeah.
If you bring your personal doctor with you.
Which is, Fear and Loathing would have wanted the doctor, but they got the lawyer. But John Polidori wrote a story, one of the first stories about vampires, and that vampire was basically Lord Byron. So there's your Byronic villain, I guess.
I guess Byron's really unique in that when people say Byronic hero, they're not talking about the works of Lord Byron and the characters in them. They're talking about the man, Lord Byron, the writer. And same with like the modern vampire is not based on characters that Lord Byron wrote. They're based on him, because his physician wrote a novel where he put total breach of patient confidentiality. Just put him in the novel, and then that's now everybody's conception of what a vampire is.
A sexy vampire. Twilight, basically.
Sexy sad boy.
Sexy sad boy.
Yeah, vampires are Byronic.
Yeah, vampires, they're
Heroes,
Byronic. They're confused.
Okay.
They're confused. They want you, but they can't have you, but they want you.
I do love... We're recording this for the podcast, so I'm just going to say, for posterity, Michael Farrar in the Instagram chat is giving a great play-by-play commentary, and I do appreciate it.
Yeah.
And we are watching it, and we will mention it when it comes up.
It's amazing.
So sorry, continue with Byron, then. So he has his Baron class. He's going around.
Baron class.
He's writing ghost stories. He's traveling around with his physician.
He's traveling. He's having sex with his cousins and his sisters.
I think everyone in Victorian England did that.
Well,
1800s England, you're just like...
England wasn't happy about this, and they were like, can you please leave for like just a moment, because you're having sex with your sister. And he's like, my half sister.
So did he go to France? He
went to Greece, and that's actually where he learned about vampires. Like the idea of vampires hadn't really been brought to like Europe yet, but the vampires were like a thing in like Slovenia and Greece,
and Romania and Eastern Europe.
So
we get vampires all the time, and he was like, interesting, fascinating. And his doctor was like, go on. His doctor was like, what they're describing is you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, what they were describing is like gross. And the doctor was like, but what if they're sexy? But what if it is a vampire, but it is sexy? And then he wrote about Lord Byron.
Yeah. As you remember from our occult creatures episode, the original vampires were just like distended, bloated bodies when they dug them up, and they're like, clearly this body that's just bloated from gross gases has been feeding and is full of, and the blood dripping from its mouth because the body is leaking is probably because it came alive last night and ate people.
So
Lord is awesome. Continue.
Lord Byron. He has a lot of works. His most famous work is probably Don Juan, which I swear that is the correct pronunciation. It is Don Juan, not Don Juan.
No way.
It is Don Juan. Ironically, Byronically, his BFF, Percy Bysshe Shelley, dies on a boat called the Don Juan. Yeah. So, dun dun dun.
So back then, a Don Juan though was like a romantic, like ladies' man. That's what the character's based on. Okay.
It's like a poem story.
All right.
It's like an epic
I'll
poem.
talk about Percy Bysshe Shelley.
Bysshe Shelley. Do you want? I'll read it. You Percy Bysshe Shelley.
Ya bish.
Ya bish. So Lord Byron will just read this little sexy poem, little excerpt from a sexy poem.
Everyone out there, take notes. Valentine's Day, it's coming up this Sunday. All right, Ariel will read you a poem.
All right, this is from Lord Byron. She walks in beauty. She walks in beauty like the night of cloudless climes and starry skies, and all that's best of dark and bright meet in her aspect and her eyes, thus mellowed to that tender light which heaven to gaudy day denies. So that's like one of his little one thing that he's like famous for is putting these really long pauses, which actually are not in this poem, but they're like these long pauses, like entire lines of the poem.
It's multiple pages.
Yeah, and women really like that because they felt like that was like
he's
their
listening.
Yes, that was like their moment.
They
were like, ooh. So he did have a ton of like fans. Had one woman send him bloody pubes. Because she cut them a little too close. That's what she said.
Yeah, she still sent them.
I know, right? Send a
Yeah.
different one.
Yeah, grow them out again. Just try to take a little.
He also had a bunch of homosexual experimentations, but he had a best bro, Percy Bysshe Shelley, who you will talk about.
Yeah, Percy Bysshe
Bysshe
Shelley.
Yeah, Bysshe.
All right, so Byron was a bit older, and Percy, he was born in a family that, like, I think his dad was just a real asshole, so I think he grew up, like, very much in debt, and money was, like, a real issue, but, like, it's like Arrested Development almost. Like, you're in a family that, like, has a claim to, like, wealth or whatever. Like, it should all work out because you have, like, a title and everything, but they were very poor. But so he went to school. He was, like, he was not cool. He was not a cool guy. He was, like, a sad boy, but he was, like, hazed, like, mercilessly. And in the British boarding schools at the time, they had a practice that is called fagging. And fagging is, all it is like, it's just hazing, that the younger boys had to be basically, like, a servant or, like, a secretary to, like, the older boys.
Kinky, but okay.
Yeah, I guess this happens in a lot of boarding schools. I've read about it. It's, like, all the way back to, like, 1600s or whatever. And stuff I read about, like, Newton and other, like, scientists back then or whatever, when they were at Oxford, like, yeah, you were supposed to be, like, the assistant or whatever for the older boys, like, at your private school or your college. Yeah, I know. But, yeah, anyway, so he refused. He was just like, no, I'm not going to be a bitch. Like, I'm not going to, like, work for someone.
He's like, that's my middle name.
Student, that's bitch. I'm my own bitch.
I'm my own bitch.
I'm my own bitch. Yeah, what did they call it? They called it, like, Shelleying or something, was, like, the shorthand.
Yeah.
So anyway, he finally gets out of school, and he, like, finally, like, came into some money. Like, his estate, like, worked itself out. He inherited a bunch of money. He told his mom and his family basically to, like, fuck off.
Yeah.
And he, like, immediately started traveling because he was like, London fucking sucks. Everyone's mean to me. So he went on some travels through, I don't think he made it all the way to the Middle East, but, like, into, like, Eastern Europe and, like, Mediterranean area. And then he returned after, like, not too long. He was just gone for, like, a year or two. And he wrote this this poem inspired by his travels about, like, a traveling pilgrim called, like, the Pilgrim Child something.
Yep.
But it was a romantic poem. And we'll talk about romanticism. And at the time, it was, like, a huge movement sweeping everything. It was, like, way bigger than emo. It was the original emo, I guess. It was romanticism. So he wrote this poem, and he has this famous quote where he said, like, and he just, like, he passed them to, like, his agent. He had, like, an agent, and he was like, here, I wrote some stuff. Maybe see if you can get it in the magazine, whatever. And it was, like, a huge hit, and it just took over London. They printed, like,
that cool?
hundreds of thousands of copies.
Poetry is, like, a hit. Like, people like, have you read the latest poem?
Well, yeah, they didn't have radio or television
well, I know.
or
I'm like, I know, but I'm like, isn't that awesome?
Electricity. It was cool.
Isn't that cool? Like, instead of, like, have you read the latest tweet or whatever, it's like, have you heard this poem? I want it. I need a copy.
Yeah, have you read?
I'm going to cut my pubes off and send them to the author.
A lot of famous great works of fiction that we know as novels today were serialized in magazines.
Yeah.
Things that today, or, you read, like, Anna Karenina or something, and it was like, no, that actually came out chapter by chapter in a newspaper because, like, that's how you distributed a lot of, like, written material in those days.
So Percy writes this poem.
So
it's a hit. Women are throwing their panties at him.
Within 3 months, he went from total literary unknown to the most famous writer.
He became
in London
a vegetarian. He
as most pop stars
also
do.
I think had sex with, like, one of his relatives. But he was, like, really young. He's like 16 or something.
No, he was like 19 or 20, but he was very young. But it's funny because everybody thinks that everything that happens in pop culture is new, right? So, like, The Weeknd being the Super Bowl halftime performer, and he's a very emo modern way back then.
Percy was kind of a dick, though. I feel like Lord Byron was, like, openly a dick. Like, he was like, we're not, the gloves are off. The skull, drinking from a skull, like, everyone. But I feel like Percy was kind of like, he was like, I'm a vegan, and, like, I care. But at the same time, he was kind of a dick to, like, Mary Shelley, I think. Yeah, like.
So we'll round it in 2 minutes. Let's finish Percy, because we could take a guest, or, like, we'll move on. I don't want to spend forever on just
these two.
So, yeah, right. So you were going to say Percy married
Mary Shelley.
Percy had a professor who was very influenced by, and started hanging out with that professor, and Percy was, like, in his, like, mid-20s and fell in love with that guy's 16-year-old daughter.
They had sex on her mom's grave.
And they did have sex on her mom's grave. Emo. We told you guys.
Yeah.
Super emo.
And he was like, this bitch is cool.
So she ran away from home with him.
Yep.
Brought along her sister.
Because her sister spoke French. Her sister also wanted to, like, bone Percy. She was like...
Yeah, that's very clear
from the context.
From the context of it, it's clear that, like, some threesomes may have been had, and it was weird.
Well, I think, like, Mary might have gotten pregnant. I don't know. Mary's, like, constantly, like, pregnant and or having miscarriages. Like, she had, like, 7 miscarriages. Percy actually saved her from one of them, though, because she was, like, bleeding out, and he was, like... He threw her in a bath of, like, cold water, which is, like, very smart at the time, because a lot of people were like...
they were like, get leeches.
Yeah.
Yeah, right, Percy by this time had, like, money, because he was famous, like a famous published writer, but I guess escaped with... Or not escaped, they sort of eloped and, like, walked to France?
Yeah, that's with the sister.
Okay, yeah, with his sister walked to France and then walked all around Europe. Anne of Chelsea has said 16 was an adult back then, but a baby today, maybe due to life expectancy. Interesting point for Anne, just to clarify real quick, is that infant mortality was super high back then. So it was very likely you would die as an infant, or you might die while having children as a woman. But if you made it to age like 20... even if you made it to age like 10 as a male, your life expectancy was like 60 to 70. You lived like a reasonable amount of time.
No, it's just young for being like writing fucking good poetry though. That's what that's what I'm about. Also, he died like 15 years later, so R.I.P. Drowned on that boat. The Don Juan.
Live fast, die young, I suppose.
So
anyway, then Mary Shelley wrote Frankenstein, but that's not a poem, so we're not going to talk about it.
And she kept his
episode.
heart. She did get his heart because they knew that she wouldn't drink out of it. Percy's heart.
She wouldn't drink.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we will. All of these, you might be saying like these are all like very soap opera kind of gestures, which is really what Romanticism is all about.
Yeah, and probably one of the most soap opera-ish is our boy. Our New Yorker.
Who?
Edgar Allan Poe.
Oh, you're jumping to Poe.
Well, we're just gonna jump around.
Okay.
I want to talk about Poe because, like, going with the like.
Do you want to take a guest?
We could, but I feel like we have a ton of poems to cover. We could. I mean, we could try and set a guest up with a poet.
Oh, hey, we have a game.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's take a guest and we'll play the game real quick.
Okay.
All right, we haven't even started the game. Can you explain the game?
I'll
take the guest.
It's blind date bard. Blind bard date.
Blind bard date.
So oh my gosh, Dr. Wires is doing stuff in front of me and it's very distracting. And I can't think when he's waving his hand in front of my face for the people on the pod. I'm sorry. But he was letting our guest in.
We're going to play blind bard date.
Yeah.
What's the game? How's it work?
So basically, we're gonna describe and maybe read some poems from these poets and see which one our guest wants to go on a date with. If they want to be our guest. But I guess they don't. I can play it with you.
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. So...
Man, we really should have introduced this gimmick.
I mean,
at
yeah.
the start of the episode.
I can play it with you. Should we do it now? I feel like I really want to talk about Edgar Allan Poe.
You can stack the deck and pick a random poet.
No, Poe deserves his own thing. He's not part of a game.
You don't want to do that?
Sure. I will. Okay, so I'm gonna actually just read you, 2 excerpts from different poems, and you have to see if you can guess which poets they are from.
Oh, I thought it was going to be easier, and you were just going to give you really obvious, like, biographical hints about their life. All right, I'll try.
No, you're a professional. You're a professional. Okay, so here's a contestant. I won't even give the.
Despite the fact we're sitting next to each other for this.
Yeah. I'll take your eye out. Okay. No. Here, cover your eye with this lace.
Okay.
That's why it's blind. Yeah. Okay. There you go. All right. So contestant number 1. This is their poem to you.
Okay.
Wild nights, where I hear with thee, wild nights should be our luxury. Futile to the winds, heart and port. Done with the compass, done with the chart, rowing in Eden. Ah, the sea. Might I but more tonight in thee. Ooh. They want to more. They want to more in you. I've never even that's some hot.
Yeah. So that is, although I think usually it's men who do the mooring. I know it's a poetic allusion. Yeah, I know this poem though. Wild Night, by the way, I'm just like, did a 3rd grader write that? That sounds like somebody who has not had sex.
True.
Yeah.
This contestant probably has not had sex.
It's Emily Dickinson.
Yes! Good job.
Yeah.
Really good. Yeah, Emily Dickinson probably never had sex, and
yeah, she should have said, "Give me more, give me more."
I know, right?
More my ship in you.
So apparently, a fun fact about Emily
Dickinson did not know how sex happens, actually.
Yeah.
So that's why she wrote those lines.
Yes, Anne of Chelsea says that she loathes her, and I really don't like Emily Dickinson. I'm not even sorry about it. I don't like her. Mm-hmm. The only cool thing about her is that all of her poems apparently can be said to the meter of a yellow rose in Texas.
Oh, can you sing?
I can't sing, but a bunch of 5th graders can, and they did it. They sang one of her.
It's what's the meter? Do you know the name of it?
No,
out there?
I don't. Well, okay. One thing that she liked to do is do these partial rhymes, and then she'd give you the real money shot at the end. Mm-hmm. So that she has this poem about a fly, and she loved things that were eye and fly, and the fact that you have eyes and you're an eye. And so this poem was about.
I know who people.
It was
people
about
who
dying.
Write like that on Facebook, and it's just infuriating.
This poem was about dying, and she doesn't rhyme fully. It's just words that kind of sound like they should rhyme. She doesn't rhyme until the very, very end, and that's when the death happens, and it's So that's why people go nuts for her, but she was not. I mean, she was really freaking scared of going out.
She didn't think she was a very good poet.
She was just I'm just my hand is moving. I'm trying to look.
She published 8 poems in her lifetime, and then upon her death, her sister discovered 2,000 unpublished poems in her room, which she then published. But Emily Dickinson herself wasn't doing a gimmick. She just was writing poems for herself. So not her fault. She didn't publish them, She didn't necessarily think they were good.
All right, here's a bunch of 5th graders doing a poem to the Emily Dickinson to the tune of the Yellow Rose in Texas. I will play this.
Okay, deservedly unpopular. Emily Dickinson would agree with you. I'm tempted to just sing the Yellow Rose of Texas. Also, they're doing the can-can.
I think they're keeping the beat with that, maybe.
By goose stepping.
And there's a younger child laughing.
Yikes.
But that's
That video is worse than her poetry.
Yeah. Well, it's cute though. So you wanna give me one?
Yeah. So this is really more of a guessing game. We're not.
Yeah. Well, oh wait, give me my thingy so I can blind myself.
Here's your
So I can put my eye out. Which Emily Dickinson had so many poems about like putting her eye out.
100
Okay.
Poems, not with helps.
Okay.
Yeah. To be fair.
I'm blind right now.
Yeah. Okay. I'm just gonna read you an excerpt.
And I have to guess who it is. Those have excerpts in them too. Yes.
I don't have enough excerpts here.
Yeah,
I'm
they
trying to
do.
Find a good one.
They do. Let me just show Dr. I won't look.
Shh, stop
They're-
cheating. Stop looking at my notes.
They're like in the
I see some quotes.
Okay,
Yeah,
there we go.
okay, I got it. All right.
Okay.
Okay. All right, here's a quote from
Wait, it's a poem. It's a poem for me?
It says quote. Well, these are all poems. I don't know why they're even called quotes.
No,
on
it's
these
a
notes.
poem for
Okay.
me. It's okay.
It's a poem for you. Okay.
It's a poem for me, and I have to guess who it is. Otherwise, I don't get to go on a date with them. There we go.
Okay. You can. Okay. Oh, you can cut all the flowers, but you cannot keep spring from coming. I want to do to you what spring
Pablo
does
Neruda.
with the cherry trees.
Is that
Love is so short, forgetting is so long.
Pablo Neruda?
That's Pablo Neruda.
I fucking knew it.
I was gonna read it in Spanish if you didn't get it.
Oh, can you read it in
Because,
Spanish? Espanol. Oh,
Puedes
and
quedar todos los flores, pero no puede. Is it quedar? How do you say to keep? Quedar. La
God.
primavera de venir. Quiero hacer a ti lo que la primavera hace con los árboles de cerezas.
what?
El amor es tan corto. Olvidar es tan largo.
Wow, who's that actor who like can't speak English that well? Who's like hot?
Does that sound like Gael Garcia Bernal?
Yeah. I was like the motorcycle one.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm like, says that she loves this poem. Oh, and the blindfold. I'm being blindfolded, so I can't like see the poet. It was like blind date.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because, love poems are blind.
Exactly.
Okay.
Let's each do one more for each other, and then
We can play via audio if we wanna.
Oh yeah, anyone
wanna-
in the chat if you want to guess, want to guess as well.
You can just play
Pop
along
off.
too. There
Pop
you go.
off in the chat. Wait, I'm gonna do one for you. Can I do one? Okay, wait. Blind yourself. Blind yourself.
How about I just don't look?
No, it's cuter. I like that.
It's a little privacy curtain.
Let me see.
In the chat, I won't look
okay.
at the chat either, so they can
Okay.
guess, but it won't give it away to me.
This is a poet that this poet is pretty cool. I just learned about them while I was doing my makeup earlier.
Okay.
Okay.
What's
My
some poet you
candle
would
burns
know?
at both ends. It will not last the night. But my foes, and my friends, it gives a lovely light. Where you used to be, there is a hole in the world, which I find myself constantly walking around in the daytime and falling in at night. I miss you like hell. Childhood is the kingdom where nobody dies. Nobody that matters, that is.
I Miss You Like Hell sounds like it's a 19th century poet.
Warmer? You're getting warmer.
I don't think it's Langston Hughes.
No,
It would be a different poem
it is
from
not.
him. I Miss You
No.
Like Hell. It's certainly not a Bukowski because there would be swearing in it.
Yep.
It's not a Ginsberg because like he's got a couple.
Yeah, it's not
different-
Ginsberg. If anyone wants to
Who's
guess.
another? No, it's a 20th century poet. I'm saying, right? 'Cause I Miss You Like Hell.
Yeah, because they didn't talk about hell before that.
No,
They
you weren't allowed
to.
to until didn't have.
I miss
That's
you.
so funny that even phrasing didn't exist in the. 1800s.
It's interesting that you think it has to be a man. Maybe it was not a man.
Yeah, I don't know enough 20th century female poets. It's not Sylvia Plath,
No,
right? Because
she's cooler.
there would be blood or bones or like fire.
She's also
imagery.
Byronic.
So who could it be? I miss you. Something. There's a hole I walk around. Used to be. So I mean, it sounds. It sounds like
wait. I'll give you a great hint.
Okay.
Their middle name is named after the building that we live across from. What it used to be.
Which is St. Vincent's Hospital.
Yes! Their middle name is St. Vincent's Hospital.
Okay. I mean, it's I still don't know if that gives me. I don't know if 20s or yeah, I don't know if 20th
Okay,
century
I'll tell you. It's okay. She wouldn't have gone on a date with you anyway because she was a fuck girl.
Edna St. Vincent Millay.
Mm-hmm. Named after St. Vincent's Hospital, legit, because like her uncle like got saved there or something. I don't know.
No way.
Yeah, and she was a fuck girl. Like she just like went around town like being cute, being a lesbian, not being lesbian. This one guy did like, she went to Paris. This guy, who she refused to marry, he did like knock her up, and then her mom gave her like an abortion in their house, and that fucked her up for many years.
I'm not familiar with her au revoir.
Yeah. She was like the manic pixie dream girl of like the idyllic scene in the like 1900s basically.
And received the Pulitzer Prize for poetry in 1923. So she was like a flapper, killing it.
Yeah. Yes, and she was like super into feminism. She tried a bit of feminism.
Born in 1892, died 1950.
Yeah,
okay, so
yeah.
It was like
I told you all the fun stuff. You don't need to read
in
numbers.
In the late 20s. Okay.
So that's her. Okay, give me one. I'm so excited. I can't wait. Wait, I need to my blindfold. Thank you. Okay.
One more.
Do. Oh yeah, this is making for great podcast. This is dead air.
John Updike wrote poetry?
Yep. Give me a
Okay.
cute one. Okay.
All right. Here's a fun one. Tell me I'm clever. Tell me I'm kind. Tell me I'm talented. Tell me I'm cute. Tell me I'm sensitive, graceful, and wise. Tell me I'm perfect, but tell me the truth. Never explain what you do. It speaks for itself. You only muddle it by talking about it. If the track is tough and the hill is rough, thinking you can just ain't enough.
Oh my god, the little engine that could! Oh, I would love to go on a date with them. I actually have no idea who that is. This sounds like Shel Silverstein.
There you go.
Yes! I was like, wait, this is like a child.
Yeah. And guess Dr. Seuss.
Yeah, Shel Silverstein.
That's why I was going to be like, okay, none of... they only use 2-syllable words.
Yeah, I'm like, what? That was a tricky one. I almost didn't get that.
That was cute.
It was really cute. We were talking about, we talked about St. Vincent.
I'm surprised they didn't have the Shel Silverstein Masks poem, because that is a really cute, like, one about love.
Oh, you mean they? You mean the person who wrote this thing? Who, like, put it...
Our notes, our compendium that we wrote before the episode.
Yeah.
Yeah, that we didn't write down.
I did write these, though. Like, the reason why it says quotes is because I copy-pasted that.
It was a Shel Silverstein about two people wearing masks so they don't recognize each other, but they actually were the perfect match for each other.
Oh, I did not find that one. I just looked up, like, Shel Silverstein, like, poem, like, romantic, whatever. I don't know.
Okay. Well, we got it. Right.
So we were talking about how Edna St. Vincent Millay was kind of gay. You know who was really gay? And maybe one of the greatest poets ever in the history of poets ever.
Oscar Wilde?
No, earlier than that. Yes, but earlier than that. Who is like the queen of lesbians? Like, literally.
Oh, Dido.
No!
Who
who lived on the Isle of Lesbos.
Oh, Sappho.
Yes! So Sappho there's so little for sure known about Sappho. And part of this is because a lot of her work was burned, and only the poems. Yes, and guessed it, Sappho. You're welcome.
Oh.
Only.
Why was it burned?
There were like a lot of burning of there were like library fires. That was like constant library fires.
In libraries.
And people would be like, in this republic, we have to like burn everything that begins with the letter.
There's empires falling apart. Yeah. Okay.
But Sappho, there's so little for real known about her. But the only works that like did not get burned were her works about women, which is why people associate her with being a lesbian, like same sex.
So you're like, she could have just been a little gay, and these were just a lark.
She was definitely promiscuous, but probably with men and women. But like a ton of shade was thrown when people wanted to condemn her at that time. Like being gay was totally cool. So they were like, she has sex with all these men, and the men are just trying to like, they're just trying to have their own platonic, whatever. But then it evolved into like, when being gay was like a bad thing, it evolved into her being gay. But the words like, I think symphonic, and obviously like lesbian comes from the Isle of Lesbos, which is like where
the lesbians
she lived.
Were.
But like, I think symphonic is the adjective. It used to mean, I think, just being promiscuous with like anyone, but now it's like associated with like same sex.
These are all like, I'm pretty right. They're Latin words based upon like people in Europe reading all these writings that were recovered basically from like ancient Rome and Greece, and like shipped over to like Europe, and then read like during the Middle Ages and like during the Enlightenment. But like, we've talked in other episodes about like graffiti in Vesuvius, for example. They found advertising like, come to this brothel, or graffiti written like, so and so sucks the best cock.
Miss fuck you.
But they didn't have
he was a
yeah, there were like women who owned like large estates who were also like worked as like, high end like prostitutes too. They didn't have the hang-ups about sex in ancient Rome.
She had like a bunch of women that she hung out with, but like so did like guys had a bunch of guys that they hung out with, and they were like,
and it was a standard.
They were like, let's like have sex with each other's thighs.
You'd have sex with your young proteges.
There's a lot of they're called Sappho's fragments, and they're just like these little pieces of poems. And there's one that's really cool, which is just "You Burn Me," which I love that.
It's so funny because they're the perfect Instagram quotes.
Yep. Throw a cute filter on like this with the petals.
2,500 years ago.
You burn me. Put them in front of a sunset.
The history of Greece on other episodes.
No, I don't have any notes on her because there aren't really notes on her that are conclusive. So
okay, Athenian Golden Age, if you recall, was about 600 to 400 BC. So I'm guessing around then.
She was a dope chick. She was beautiful too. Like everyone was like, she's really like. She's gorgeous. Honey, she woke up like this.
Okay.
Yeah, so can we talk about Poe?
So Sappho was the original, I suppose,
lesbian.
Like love poet, though. Those were the first love poems that are recorded, right?
So a lot of other like Plato, and they're like, she is the greatest poet of all time. And if
her contemporaries were like, come on. Like,
they're like, let's burn some of her works so that they won't, But yeah, she's awesome. And go read some. I think her fragments are like the coolest because they can maybe, here's a fun, like cute writing exercise. Maybe like take one of her fragments and try and write your own poem, like with that as the title. Oh my God. I just came up with that just now.
Great exercise for viewers.
So Poe.
We're just gonna jump.
We're gonna jump.
Like
We're
that.
jumping around.
Okay.
Yeah, because we can't not talk about Poe, and then we'll talk about your girl Sylvia.
We better get Shakespeare in here.
Yeah, we will. Don't worry.
Okay.
Got it. That's why I'm jumping around, because I want to make sure we hit.
Everyone knows Shakespeare, but let's
Yeah.
do some Poe.
So
Anne of Chelsea believes Poe is bleak, and
he's
self-indulgent. But
he's awesome.
There's one particular Poe poem that will change your opinion on that, because Poe wrote a really gorgeous sort of fantastical love poem.
Yes, he did.
To his doomed wife, who
everyone at this time is just dying.
We were
of,
saying, a funny thing reading stories of people in like 18 and 1900s is that like there are just sickly people who are just like this is also true if you read like Russian novels from the period, or like English novels. Is just like, oh yeah, they have to go to the countryside to get fresh air, or their doctor like says they have to do that. They go to these like baths and they're just like sick all the time, and then they just die tragically.
Yeah.
And
they're like and then
it was just a
oh my god, it's just like today.
No, sickly people. Yeah.
How topical. So
everyone is constantly coughing blood onto their handkerchiefs.
Yeah.
And putting them away.
Of consumption.
They all had tuberculosis, and I think
in New York City, which I think is super cool. We actually visited, and by visited we mean we stood outside and we're like, yes. Like 3 of them, because 3 of them are in a like 5-block radius. One of them is on 6th and Waverly.
It's very cool. Poe lived in the West Village.
Yeah.
Like all over the place, because he was constantly
Work?
behind on rent and moving to
Yes.
It was like they must have not really gone by like they didn't have credit checks back then, so Poe just kept moving to new
he
places.
was like he was an editor and critic as well. Like he was like one of the first big, I guess now famous poets or authors that made his whole living as a poet, like, or as a writer. Sorry, like not as a poet, as a lot of his money came from working for like the New York Times, or like being an editor, being a critic of other people's poems. He lived all around New York. He lived at there's this place called the City Dispensary, which is right across from the Stonewall in like Park.
I mean,
you
clearly
can go look at
there
that.
were writers before them, but they weren't people who otherwise would just be broke and die. They were like people for money generally, like being able to be a writer, like Lord Byron or someone else. Is like you had a title, you had family money. Going back to the founding of like the Americas and the great writers, then like there was always some means of support behind you. You're from like a wealthy family that would support it.
His parents died, though. That's what happened.
Poe was broke, and was kind
He
of.
was Poe.
He was Poe.
He was Poe.
But he made a living as a journalist and writer.
Yeah,
which was,
and
he was one of the first. Because,
he would walk.
Yeah.
He would walk every freaking where because he was too poor to take the bus, and he would walk 5 miles each way.
This?
The 1800s.
Yeah, they didn't have buses back then.
The late 1800s. The late 1800s.
They did not have buses in the late 1800s.
I don't know. I didn't look up the date. I looked up like the character I'm looking up right now.
Okay.
So I was telling something exciting. Now I'm distracted because I'm thinking about
Model
dates.
T was like the early 1900s.
Okay, look up. Why don't you look up the date right now?
All right.
Why don't you do that? Okay, I think it's actually in this sheet of paper. You can find it right here.
Oh my god.
So he was, it wasn't like the bus, it was like the auto something.
They didn't have any of that shit. They had like carriages back then.
1849.
Poe was born in 1809, died 1840. Oh, Poe died at 40.
It was like the rail. It was like there was a thing at that time.
Okay.
I read this like, I swear to God, I read this like
they had trains. Yes, they had.
But they had like a bus, like a rail, like a.
They had a light rail. They had a light rail system.
No, I swear to God, I have literally read this like 5 different times. He was too poor to take public transportation, whatever that was in New York at that time. Okay? All right. Okay. Are we happy? Yes. Thank you. That's like.
It's just not fair to say that he wasn't taking the bus.
All right. He walked
didn't
everywhere.
Take the subway because
we're fixated
it
on
didn't
this.
Exist.
he was too poor to take public transportation. He was too poor to get. He had to walk because he was poor. All right. He also was another cousin fucker. Marrier.
Just a little context, right? Like American Revolution is in like the late 1700s, right? Constitution is 1776. Yeah. Poe was born in 1809.
People were not cool with this.
Not that much later. So when you read The Raven, it sounds like, or like, you know, Poe's like horror stories that are like contemporary, like very scary actually, right? Yeah. The Telltale Heart or like the Cast of Amontillado or whatever is like, this was written by a guy
who's fucking his cousin.
No, but okay, thanks. But 40 years after the American Revolution, it's like these are very old stories. It's cool.
It is
how contemporary his writing still feels when you read it.
It's true.
A lot of stuff from that time period feels very old.
But can I just say, like, Anne is saying that was the norm. This was not the norm because his cousin Virginia was 14, I think, or 15, and he was like 27.
Still the norm.
That was not.
Everybody
people
doing that stuff back then.
It wasn't. People did not. They were like they were like vaguely uncomfortable with it. And his aunt though really loved him in a paternal way and like was kind of like his agent. Oh. So she was like moving. Like people think that he might have married Virginia, this like very young cousin, because he didn't want her to like marry off and like lose the maternal aunt.
It's like, I'm not gonna let somebody else sleep with my cousin.
Yeah, exactly.
It's the Wolf of Wall Street. Jonah Hill's character. I got a hot cousin.
Yeah,
I'm let some other guy have sex with her. That's ridiculous. Come on.
Yeah.
That's why I gotta do it.
But yeah, Virginia was a singer, and one day she was singing, and the next day she was coughing up blood. Let's go to New Jersey where it's better. So they did, and he had to walk.
The Pit and the Pendulum, right? Which is like basically the original Saw.
Yeah.
Sort of torture porn, but yeah.
But like everybody that Poe loved or was close to him basically died. And people used to call him the Raven because he would like wear all black and he was
run that man with dark feet, very uptight about his appearance and always like having like his suits were like glossy because they were very worn, but they were like all fit and were like well tailored and everything.
Yeah.
So he was the Raven.
He was the Raven, and he wrote the Raven on the Upper East Side. He describes a room in the Raven a little bit. He describes a room, and there was a mantle in this place that he was staying at the time on the Upper East Side, and he carved his name absentmindedly into the mantle, and there's that mantle still exists, the mantle that he wrote the Raven at, and I think you can go visit it. I forget where.
Okay,
you can.
So because everybody I think is very skeptical who's listening to the show right now, in this show about love poets with these roses falling on us, we're talking about Poe, who's most famous for his like horror short fiction. So can you read an excerpt of?
Yes, I'm just gonna read the whole thing because I think
Poe's
it's
love
short
poem,
enough.
which really is one of the sweetest love poems.
Yes. Oh, whoa! How did we get?
Which he wrote to his cousin who died very early.
His cousin wife, Virginia. Although many women say that because right after she died, he was like, "I can't die alone," and he like he was just like calling up old lovers, and a lot of women are like, Annabelle Lee is about me.
He was. He's very famous alcoholic as well.
Yeah.
So that's why he died when he was 40. But like, real hard drinking at the time, getting thrown out of New York saloons constantly. So
Annabelle Lee. It was many and many a year ago in a kingdom by the sea, that a maiden lived there whom you may know by the name of Annabelle Lee. And this maiden she lived with no other thought than to love and be loved by me. I was a child, and she was a child in this kingdom by the sea. But we loved with a love that was more than love, I and my Annabelle Lee, with the love that the winged seraphs of heaven coveted her and me. And this was the reason that long ago in this kingdom by the sea, a wind blew out of a cloud, chilling my beautiful Annabelle Lee, so that her highborn kinsmen came and bore her away from me, to shut her up in a sepulchre in a kingdom by the sea. The angels, not half so happy in heaven, went envying her and me. Yes, that was the reason, as all men know in this kingdom by the sea, that the wind came out of the cloud by night, chilling and killing my Annabel Lee. But our love was stronger by far than the love of those who were older than we, of many far wiser than me, and neither the angels in heaven above nor the demons down under the sea can ever dissever my soul from the soul of the beautiful Annabel Lee. For the moon never beams without bringing me dreams of the beautiful Annabel Lee, and the stars never rise, but I feel the bright eyes of the beautiful Annabel Lee. And so, on the all-night tide, I lie down by the side of my darling, my life and my bride, in her sepulchre by the sea, in her tomb by the sounding sea.
A lot of nice
Isn't
internal
that-
rhymes there, and very cute.
I just think it's so sweet, because, like, yeah, it's like his beautiful young bride, like, got taken away from him too early.
Mm-hmm.
Like Nicole Kidman in Moulin Rouge.
Mm-hmm.
She
And
had
he's
like
joke's on you, I'm going to lie down by her corpse.
yeah.
Inside her tomb.
But
very
first when you said
Oh.
I was like, finish that sentence.
Very Shakespearean.
Yeah. Should we talk about Shakespeare?
Speaking of which...
Segues.
I mean, yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, let's get into it. Because, right, we've talked about the romantics and this whole shift, but, like, the thing that's maybe anticlimactic or ridiculous about all of this is Shakespeare is very much like The Simpsons back then, in that, like, any joke you have or idea or concepts, Shakespeare did it first.
Mm-hmm.
So just the notion of romanticism and being, like, not logical, not having your love bound by, like, marriage arrangements or inheritances or, like, as a political thing, but by, like, what the heart wants. It's like, yeah, guess who was writing this, like, 300 years before the Romantic movement?
Your boy.
It was
Your
your boy
boy
Shakespeare.
Your boy Shakespeare.
Yeah, he's so good.
He's like the best.
This is why no one believes that Shakespeare, not no one, but, like, there's all these conspiracy theories that it was a collection of writers and it was, like, this person, that. I'm sure everyone out there knows Shakespeare's, you know, like, dramatic works or whatever, the comedies and the dramas, and The Taming of the Shrew, and A Midsummer Night's Dream, and Romeo and Juliet.
And, the one that I'm named after. Hello.
Oh, and The Tempest.
The one that actually no one really, people are like, he wrote that?
Less known, The Tempest. But in addition to just these, like, incredible, you know, like, dramatic plays and performances, which read like poetry anyway, Shakespeare wrote sonnets. And, like, you know, the form was around, like, the style of writing poems, but Shakespeare wrote, Shakespeare's sonnets are, like, invented the love poem, basically. So everything else, again, annoyingly, that Shakespeare was born so early, everybody else had to copy him and kind of follow in his footsteps. So we started off the episode with Sonnet 18.
Yes, we
Shall
did.
I compare thee to a summer's
day?
But, the sonnets are all written, too. They use, like... Yeah, irony you'd find in a modern song, almost, right? So a great comparison is... I just thought this up, actually. This is my original idea. In the Beach Boys' God Only Knows, which is, like, a very famous pop song that's regarded as one of the most beautiful romantic pop songs, it starts with, if you should ever leave me, life would still go on, believe me, but what good would living do me? Because the world would mean nothing to me. So it's, like, this reverse of, like, he starts out nonchalant, and it was like, but also I would be devastated and want to die.
Yeah.
Which Shakespeare does in a lot of the sonnets, too. That sort of irony. Yeah, so he only beat him to it by, like, 400 years.
Yeah, he was the shit. I have a quotation, but I don't think it's from one of his sonnets.
What's it from?
Isn't it Romeo and Juliet?
There's so many classic lines, right? Yeah, Romeo and Juliet.
The Course of True Love, that one.
Never did run.
The Course of True Love never did run smooth. I think that's Romeo and Juliet.
No, that's a Midsummer Night's Dream.
It's a Midsummer Night's Dream. Okay, there we go.
I don't know.
Why
It's
don't-
one of those two.
Does anyone know where?
Readers, the course of true
Be
love never
be
did
not
run
afraid
smooth.
of greatness. Some are born great, some achieve greatness, and then some have greatness thrust upon them. To thine own self be true, and it must follow. Oh, it's Hamlet. Polonius says this. This is from Clueless. That's how I know it. The greatest Shakespeare work of all time. To thine own self be true, and it must follow as the night, the day thou'st not cast, then be false to any. When Amber and Cher like in the car, and Amber, or it's not Amber, it's like some other like chick who's smart, quote unquote smart.
It's Josh's college girlfriend.
Yeah.
Who like Cher's a little envious of.
Yeah.
She gets the quote wrong.
And she's
they're
like,
arguing.
Hamlet said like.
She's like, actually, Polonius said that.
She's
I know
like,
my Mel Gibson.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's how we know that. I'm like, ding, ding, there we go. He died the same day that he was born. Do you know that?
Shakespeare.
Yeah.
Oh. What day was that?
April 23rd.
Okay. Oh, we didn't. One last factoid about Poe.
Mm-hmm.
What day did Poe die?
Election day.
For some reason.
It was like February.
Yeah.
A lot of these things happened around this time. Right?
Oh, yeah, that's
like,
true.
Yeah.
Poe died like this week, I believe.
Yeah. Poe died on election day.
The election.
They were like, pull the lever, drink more alcohol, pull the lever.
What a way to go.
Also, because you could just write whatever you wanted back then in the newspaper. Some dude wrote like his rival basically wrote like a really nasty obituary, and that obituary just like exists, and it's so like catty. It's like, how dare you? Like, he's like, he wasn't very good anyway. He's like, some may mourn him, others may not. Like,
But we
Yeah.
know Poe, and we do not know the name of the rival. So
exactly.
Yeah. Do you have other Shakespeare facts about? Granted, I mean, it's still debated.
Shakespeare.
The existence of Shakespeare, record keeping was spotty. Certainly, the Globe Theatre existed. Its primary playwright was Shakespeare.
He was known. So if Edgar Allan Poe is known as the Raven, he's known as the Bard of Avon.
Mm-hmm. Bard of Avon.
He was married to Anne Hathaway.
His wife's name. Yeah.
Great in The Princess Diaries and Les Mis. Love her.
If Anne Hathaway.
Yeah.
Anne Hathaway.
I think he had 2 kids. Yeah, a lot of people think he was gay.
Why?
Just because like he had. Oh, I know why. Because there's a
Honey, all the great literary talents.
No, there's I forget this guy's name, but there's a guy who's often seen as like his muse or keeps coming up in the sonnets. And like always traveled with him, it was like one of those.
Yeah. Also wrote like 20 to 30 epic plays.
Yes. Should we talk about?
We don't have too much else to say is the thing.
Yeah.
Because read Shakespeare.
He speaks for himself. Yeah. That's a Poe story. Shakespeare's rising up from the speaking for himself. Oh yeah. So let's see. Speaking of gay poets, let's talk about Oscar Wilde.
Okay.
Yeah, and then we'll do Sylvia Plath.
Okay. She's a sad one.
Because I know you like Sylvia Plath.
And then we didn't.
Walt Whitman.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Those are great ones. That's a good final 3 to round out the cast.
Yeah. The cast. And then we can just rattle off like a bunch of honorable mentions and like one fact about them at the end.
More rounds of the guessing game. It was pretty good.
Yeah, it's fun, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Let's talk about. We'll do
Oscar
a guessing
Wilde,
game.
right?
Yeah, Oscar Wilde. So, Oscar Wilde, he is known as a playwright, but he wrote a lot of poems too.
An author wrote The Portrait of Dorian Gray.
Yes, which is this is such a Queenie like thing. So he got inspired to write the Portrait of Dorian Gray.
Wilde became super Christian Anne. Actually, Wilde, as Ariel will detail, later in life, Wilde became super
He's
Christian.
a very crazy story that I did not know.
Very kind of hedonist earlier in his life, and thus the Portrait of Dorian Gray.
Yeah, he became Christian because he was wrongfully imprisoned for 2 years. And so he was like, all I have left is God. So the Picture of Dorian Gray, he was at his friend's house who was an artist, portrait of Dorian Gray. He was at his friend's house who's an artist, and the artist had just like made a painting of this very hot man, and him and his friend were sitting around, and they were like, isn't it a shame that the man will age and the painting will not? We should wish that it would be the other way around. And then Oscar Wilde was like, I think I'm going to write a story about that.
When was this, by the way? What's the period for Oscar Wilde? Is this
You can
this
look
also
through
late 1800s?
look through this and find your dates, because I'll just keep talking about them. I don't know. I didn't have the dates memorized.
Right? Like, was this before or after Frankenstein?
You look that up. While I tell facts, he's definitely in
Percy
there.
Bysshe.
He's definitely in there somewhere. There's front to back pages on there too.
Oh man, I got.
And do you know when Oscar Wilde existed? So he was married, and he
You had kids, right?
playwright, and the 1800s. He was in the 18th. All these people were in the 1800s, pretty much.
Like, I don't know when.
Except for Sappho and Shakespeare. That's all you gotta know.
Poe was early 1800s. Walt Whitman was Civil War.
So, okay, say the
Continue.
dates in your head, please. It confuses.
All right.
Confuses. Numbers
So
confuse.
then,
So,
famous witticisms. That was kind of what Oscar Wilde is now best known for.
he's known for being super witty, but also he did write a lot of love poems, and he kept sleeping with men and like kind of having like correspondences with men, but he would write these things off as like just being like, he's like, we're just two love poets. Like when we write letters to each other, it's just like, that's like how we write to each other, because we're love poets.
Yeah.
He lent his jacket to a friend, and there were like some love letters in the jacket, and the friend was like, what is this? And he kind of brushed it off as like, yeah, we're just working on some bits together.
He's not in here.
That's fine. Don't worry about it. Tons of information on him, except for the dates. If you want to look them up, you can. So he started to get in trouble right around The Importance of Being Earnest. So, like, The Importance of Being Earnest was his best known play. It is amazing. It's so funny. It's so ahead of its time. It's great. But he started to get in trouble because he had this affair with a man named Boise, who is this like a nickname of his, but his name is Boise. And Boise's father really, really didn't want Oscar Wilde involved with his son, and the father had actually was like written the handbook for like the boxing club of London, so he was not a guy that you wanted to mess with.
Fisticuffs. He was a Marquess.
He was a Marquess. A Marquess of what? A Marquess of Laf.
So we should clarify, this is the end of the 1800s.
Yes.
This is like 1890s this happened. When we were talking earlier about like Lord Byron and Percy Bysshe Shelley and Mary Shelley, that's all like the very early 1800s. That's like 1816 or something.
Yes.
Oscar Wilde is like 1890s.
But being gay is a
action.
crime at this point. It is a crime. It has not been like decriminalized yet. You can go to, like, you can get serious jail time for it. Blackmailing Wilde, and he one day actually shows up to the play, like The Importance of Being Earnest. And Wilde and Boise are both like kind of writing this off. Wilde says, I don't know what the rules are in the boxing handbook, but in the Wilde handbook, it's shoot at first offense or whatever. So he's kind of like, he's pretty ballsy.
Oh man, we should have really had photos ready to go of all these characters.
Yeah. So Boise,
Just him with a cane.
Yeah,
looking
it's great
cool.
for the podcast. We got to describe. We must describe.
I mean, it's a man with great shoulder-length hair, really thick. He was 6'3", and this
Yeah.
is in the 1890s, so he
He's
was like
looking
super tall then.
dapper AF in this thing.
Just
He's
like
got
a big dude, and he's holding a cane.
yeah.
And just had an acid tongue, right?
yeah.
So it's like
He was like, "Honey, my rules are shoot at first sight."
his witticisms are what he's kind of best known for now.
So
right?
Boise's like, you know what? You should actually sue my dad, because Boise like hated his dad, and he was like, you should sue him for like defamation of character, basically. And Wilde's friends were like, please don't do that. You will get in a lot of trouble. This will backfire. And Wilde is like, I'm gonna do it.
Anne has asked if Wilde have any money, and so Wilde was Irish by birth, which means he did not have any money when he was coming up, but the money by that time. And then as Ariel will detail, he lost it.
He lost. So, the trial was really, there was a real twist. So it ended up Wilde suing for, I think it's called like liability, or basically defamation of character.
Yeah.
And it was suing for embarrassment.
So the court actually investigated it, and they were like, "No, wait, you are fornicating with another man. What do they call it? Indecency with another male or something?" Was like the charge.
The problem. Well, the problem man that Wilde had an affair with, and then the court was like, record scratch. Wait a second, like you are gonna go to like jail.
So then it wasn't during that trial. There were two separate trials later. Oscar Wilde was found guilty and sentenced to 2 years hard labor in prison for being gay.
So his lawyer actually did something really cool, but Wilde didn't called for like a brief recess, I guess, like a 2-day lapse before, he was like, let me gather my papers or whatever. And a lot of people think that was to let Wilde escape if he wanted to like go to Paris where it was more acceptable, but he didn't. And he basically went.
He's like, well, the lawyer didn't tell me about it.
Yeah, he was like, he didn't leave any notes in my jacket pocket.
So he got 2 years hard labor. Anne had mentioned that on Instagram that he like became very Christian. So during his time in prison, it sucked. They starved you and made you work super hard labor, and like it would kill you. So he, despite being like a big guy and like pretty strong, it kind of like crushed his spirit. He became very Christian, and it like ruined his health for the rest of his life, which was pretty short. He lived a couple years after that. As soon as he got out of prison, he kind of like self-banished, I guess.
Self-quarantined.
To Paris. So he moved to Paris, and like, but he was poor. He had been like ruined. He wrote one more like long poem or like work of literature about prison. And
my dad would have loved him.
And he advocated a lot from abroad for like, penal reform or whatever. And like, that was kind of the end of him. That was his decline.
And his sons, it was really sad because his sons like never saw him. Like during the trial, they like went somewhere. They went to like, I think Switzerland. They're like neutral territory. And but his legacy lives on, and his name was taken off of the importance of being earnest at that time. But that was like part, I guess they could do that. They were like, you're gay. You didn't write, which is they're like, you couldn't have written this play.
So can we hear some witticisms?
Oh.
I know the one, I may be laying in the gutter, but at least I'm looking at the stars.
Yeah, I think that's a good one.
You can read any Oscar Wilde quote and add honey at the end of it, and it makes it better.
Actually, I do. I have a letter. I have like a little excerpt from a letter that he was writing, back and forth to Boise in here. So it's like I
do recommend once you're allowed to do indoor dining again in New York, visit the restaurant Oscar Wilde's, because they're
very cool.
And in their bathrooms they have recordings of his quotations and throughout the restaurant.
So this is a little excerpt from a letter that he wrote to Boise. My own dear boy, I went to Birdie today. Today I rode it home, and then I went and sat with my mother. Death and love seem to walk on either the desert without your dainty feet. Write me a line and take all my love now and forever, always and with devotion, but I have no words for how I love you, Oscar. Isn't that awesome? Like, London is a desert without your dainty feet. Like, yes, go off, queen. And then, yeah.
It is a marvel that those red rose-leaf lips of yours should be made no less for the madness of music and song than for the madness of kissing.
Like, yes.
Honey.
All right, so should we talk about...
Wait, one more. He's got, to lose one parent is a
Is
tragedy. But to lose two parents speaks of carelessness.
Yes. A handbag, Mr. Worthing. Yeah, you got to read The Importance of Being Earnest. Go read it when you're eating at Oscar Wilde's to each other. We have to do that. That will be an activity. All right, so should we talk about Sylvia Plath?
Yeah.
And then we'll just go back and forth, rapid fire, the poet guessing blind date.
All right, let's hear about the tragic Sylvia Plath.
Don't you know about Sylvia Plath? I thought she was your girl.
I do know a decent amount about Sylvia Plath.
Tell us about Sylvia Plath.
So Sylvia Plath, an American poet from the first half of the 20th century. So we're in the 1900s now. And, like, relatively contemporary if you read her stuff. So famous as a novelist who wrote The Bell Jar. So she's really, like... What was The Bell Jar? It was, like, I guess, like, 50s and 60s when she was famous. So post-World War II. So when she was very young, just came from, like, I think, like, a pretty, like, middle-class family. But definitely had, like, issues with her father. Growing up, he was very controlling, but so sort of to escape her like kind of like oppressive family life, was a writer and entered this contest for Vogue magazine, which was around in the, like, you know, in the 50s, and she won. So when she was, I think, 19, got to do a summer internship at Vogue in New York City, and it was her first time she'd ever seen New York, and she was kind of blown away, and also like. The vapidness of a lot of the interactions played a big role, and then kind of throughout her life she was like plagued by depression.
Yeah, so The Bell Jar she wrote when she was super young, and she got out of a mental hospital. I think for the first time she tried to commit suicide.
Yeah, so The Bell Jar is like semi-autobiographical.
I feel like it's like 100% autobiographical,
it's
but people
pretty
are like, they're like, surely her life was not that terrible at that young, but yeah, I think it was.
Yeah.
She got electroshock therapy when she was like a child to like.
Yeah. So she was
adult.
like a known writer, but not super famous writer at the time. Although I don't offhand know any Ted Hughes, and they fell in love. But she was like writing poetry then. They went to like writers' retreats and were married for like several years. They had 2 children, and then Ted Hughes was a real shitty husband. And abused her and like drank a lot, and then he took a mistress, and then they like I don't think they agreed. He just separated. He left her.
Yeah.
About 9 months before she like committed suicide. So in those 9 months she was like severely depressed and tried to kill herself multiple times by like driving her car into a river.
That movie about all of them.
So anyway, but yeah, like stuck her head in an oven and turned on the gas. So
that one worked.
Really depressed.
That was the winner.
What was it? Yeah, I mean, after The Bell Jar had been published, I think like just a year or 2 before then, actually.
Really? Oh, it had been published, but she wrote it when she was like a young girl and like had just gotten out of a mental institution.
Maybe.
I thought. And
I can't verify that.
Okay.
But anyway, it was
allegedly.
It was published about a year before her death and met with like kind of critical indifference. Although it's now like months before her death, despite this like crippling depression, wrote what's regarded as some of like the greatest poetry of the 20th century.
Like the poem Ariel.
Like the poem Ariel. None of it's really poetry that you can be glorified in. A lot deals with her, like, feelings of loss and betrayal from Ted Hughes. A lot of feelings of vengeance. She's regarded as a very feminist poet, which I don't feel... And I think she even claimed she wasn't explicitly feminist so much as she was just a really pissed off, angry woman. But she just wrote really visceral poetry. So she's a phenomenal poet. So go read Lady Lazarus, I think, is a poem that will knock the wind out of you. It's so good. Not love poems, but romantic in the sense of tragically doomed.
Yeah. Let's see. Do you want to read like a little smoosh from it? I have it right here.
I like Lady Lazarus so much. I've thought of reading it at poetry nights before, and it's so good that I feel for me to read it would cheapen it.
You want to read a quotation?
I
from
really
her
think it's so
on
good.
There, real quick.
Sure.
Real quick. They're right here.
Okay. Oh, and one factoid, right? Because Ted Hughes was still her husband when she killed herself. He inherited her estate, and to his credit, at least, like, and then they, he, with her, like, executor of her will or whatever. I don't even think she had a will, but executing her estate, published her poems. They were wildly famous and like successful because they're phenomenal. He did not keep any of the proceeds. They all went into a trust for her children.
Yeah.
He felt really terrible about it, being such a shitty husband. His mistress killed herself 6 years later. He never killed himself.
Oh.
He lived another like 40, 50 years. He died in like the 80s or 90s.
Oh.
And he at one point, like when he was like, I think it was in the 80s or 90s, he published a book basically like where he talked about his side of sort of the relationship with Sylvia Plath. And it was like a lot of people, I think it was a collection of poems, I guess, about their like time together. And a lot of it was his remorse at like how their marriage went.
Too little too late.
And it won I think it won a Pulitzer, it did really well. He actually had terminal lung cancer when it was published, and he died within a year. So he was heavily criticized when it was published. They're like, you're profiting off of your wife's tragic death, and you killed her. And he didn't respond to any of it, and then he died shortly after. So,
sounds like a Poe story to me.
I mean, yeah, as far as being a shitty guy, I guess. Ted Hughes,
I don't want to talk about him then. Just read a quotation about her. Because that's what the people should come away with, honey.
You can read it.
Okay, really?
You do too much. I actually don't like reading Sylvia Plath aloud.
Perhaps when we find ourselves wanting everything, it is because we are dangerously close to wanting nothing. I like that. That's like my philosophy. I'm down with that. I like her poems. She's like it's like the morning song or something. And it's about her being pregnant, and it's like how she does not. It's like how she does not want to be pregnant. And it's like the best description of like pregnancy that I've ever heard in a poem, because normally it's like, I'm full, I'm a moon, I'm this, and she's kind of like,
a lot of metaphors, of natural metaphors, but of like blood and bones and fire and stone.
All right, should we do like rapid fire, the poetry game, or just naming poets?
Give me a little guessing game here.
All right.
What do you got?
Okay. Do not go where the path may lead. Go instead where there is no path, and leave a trail.
Is that Emerson?
Yes.
All
right, your turn.
Could have been Frost, right? The path less traveled.
Yes, it could have. Yeah.
He has enough Earth Mother BS.
There are enough.
I believe that's Plath.
So yeah, we're doing rapid fire poet quotations, love poet quotations. Seeing if we can guess them. Just pick one, because we're gonna do them all.
I'm trying. This little selection or whatever. There's some like cute ones that
just
we don't
do
have.
it. Just
so
do
I'm
it.
trying to find
Just
some
do
fun
it.
ones.
Just do one. It'll be fun. Come on. I'm gonna do another one for you if you don't pick. In 10, 9, okay, 8.
Keep going. I'm still looking.
All right, here you go. Ready?
Light of things, let nature be your teacher.
Walt Whitman.
Fill your paper with the breathings of your heart.
Was that Walt Whitman?
No, Whitman would have mentioned nature.
And he would have like mentioned life or something.
Right.
Let's see. Give me a little
best
hint.
portion of a good man's life is the longest.
Give me a little hint.
Okay, so I mean, this is like it's romanticism, but it feels like early, unpolished romanticism, right? 'Cause
Wordsworth?
There you go.
I'm like, yeah.
How did you know it was Wordsworth?
Yep, the early unpolished romanticism.
Because Wordsworth was the original romantic.
He was. Word?
Wordsworth. Follow your heart. That's, yeah.
In 3 words, I can sum up everything I've learned about life. It goes on. I feel like...
Oh, that's saucy. It's a saucy
yeah,
quote.
but it's not a super saucy person. He's just a, just a dude traveling paths.
I mean, that's got to be another 20th century poet.
He's traveling paths that other people might not travel. Roads.
Oh, is this
maybe?
Frost?
Yeah.
Okay, that feels frosty.
Yeah, life goes on. Love it.
When was Frost around, by the way?
He was
What's his deal?
1874 to 1963.
Okay. So he was like early 1900s.
He loved
probably,
snow, just like his last name. He loved snow in the woods.
74. Okay.
All right.
He lived to like 90.
If you don't get this one,
This
I don't
whole
know.
episode will have been for naught,
yeah.
I suppose.
Hold fast to dreams, for if dreams die, life is a broken winged bird that cannot fly. It's kind of jazzy.
I know. Is it Langston Hughes?
Yes.
Is that
Yeah.
from like What Happens When Your Dream Deferred?
Yes.
Something does it shrivel like raisin
Yeah.
in the sun or whatever. Okay.
Yeah, he's called. He had a new literary art called jazzy poetry.
Yeah. What happens to dream deferred? Does it dry up like a raisin in the sun, or does it explode?
Does it explode? Let's see. We should drop like some Whitman in there because he was awesome. Walt Whitman was super cool.
Yeah, and there's no what is it, Elizabeth Bishop?
There isn't Elizabeth Bishop in here because I guess I didn't think of Elizabeth Bishop as writing anything particularly like romantic. She was a
think
very
you're right. Very New York
poet. These are kind of.
She has a cute poem about walking Union Square with the man who didn't love me.
Oh,
which
yeah.
is cute.
Yeah, she's a very cute. I would recommend like checking her out.
Okay. You want
So-
one more?
Well, I was gonna Walt Whitman. I guess
Oh, yeah, we didn't
your
really get
flesh
into
shall
Whitman.
be a great poem. Be curious and not judgmental.
You did want to. Do you want to give us a 1-minute summary of Era?
Yeah, he became this like. Well, okay. Here's the cool thing. He wrote Leaves of Grass, his great like anthology, I guess. He'd been publishing it and writing it like his whole life, basically. There's so many editions. If you're a real like Waltzophile,
If you're a Whithead.
if you're a Whithead, then
There's
you
like 20 different editions of
when
Leaves
you
of
talk
Grass.
about Leaves of Grass, you'd be like, well, which edition are you talking about?
Are you like the 1862 or are you more like a 1870s?
Yeah, he'd been publishing it forever. The first rendition, he didn't have titles for any of the poems. Someone critiqued that, so then the next one after that, they all were titled poem. Like someone said, "Are these even poems?" So the next one, it was like poem about this, a poem about that. He was the poet of democracy, basically, and he really changed his own mind throughout his life. He was not racist, but he was like a free soiler. So he was like, I don't believe in slavery happening in front of me, but like it can happen over there. But then the Civil War happened, and he was a volunteer nurse, and he saw very horrible things, and he kind of changed his tune and
he
became very
the original hippie.
yeah.
He lived on a commune by himself.
He did, yeah.
Basically,
And
a
he-
single one-person commune.
He has a really great poem called "I Sing the Body Electric," and also The Song of Myself, which if you want to walk in a circle and read, you can go to the AIDS Memorial on the Greenwich Triangle, and you can walk in a circle and read that poem. It's really fun.
Yeah. By the way, he wrote "I Sing the Body Electric" before
Lana Del Rey.
Before there was widespread electricity, also. So it meant a different thing back then.
Also before Lana Del Rey.
Also before Lana Del Rey.
Long before. You think she came up with...
Past his prologue, my friend.
He also was gay, and he wrote about... He loved men. He just loved it. He just was like a huge fan of the beauty of men.
Oh, I didn't know that about
but
women.
Also wrote a bunch of erotic, erotic, I guess, hetero things. And at the time, he got way more in trouble for that, like a thing that happened and no one talked about, I guess.
He's funny.
Yeah.
A funny chap.
So people were like, yeah, like the gay sex poems, erotic poems were sort of like, people were just like, yeah, it's like a fantasy, whatever. But there's this poem about two, a male and a female eagle having sex that he wrote about, and people were really mad about that one. They were like, burn that shit. It's Satan.
Oh, he scandalized people in the
with the eagle sex.
1860s or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So yeah. There you go. All right.
That's a whole gamut of romantic, tragic poets there. Right?
Oh.
And love poets.
For Anne, I know that you love Yeats, so I'll just do one little Yeats line.
Okay.
I have only, let's see.
Irish poet.
But I, being poor, have only my dreams. I have spread my dreams under your feet. Tread softly because you tread on my dreams. Ah, tear. So cute.
Yes. Oh, we didn't talk about Keats.
Keats, he died of tuberculosis.
Keats died at like 25 of tuberculosis.
Yeah. He was hot. He was a real...
Yeah, in his very short time wrote some really phenomenal poems inspired by, like, I guess, stars and astrology and...
Super into the zodiac.
Super into the...
You know, the original Walter Mercado.
Mm-hmm.
The British Walter Mercado.
Yeah, widely regarded as the original Walter Mercado.
Yeah.
Hey, Alex Romnick.
Yeah.
We're just finishing up
our
crash course on romantic poetry.
So, if people want to learn more about these poets in a sort of visual, musical way, what should they do?
So this Saturday we'll be hosting at 9 p.m. An Ariel dance / rave about romantic poetry. Nothing like dancing about poetry.
Word.
So
get it? Word.
Nice.
Okay.
I mean, maybe I'll see. I've got some tricks up my sleeve as far as the audio is concerned, and there may be a little poetry worked in there.
Ooh.
But all sorts of poems about love and being erotic. Some about being lonely. Some for the single ladies. Some for the couples.
Some for the thruples.
And more. Yeah, we got stuff for everybody at the rave, and Ariel will be embodying 3 different romantic poets as you perform Ariel.
Yeah, I'm gonna channel them. I'm gonna channel Edgar Allan Poe and do a seance and get 2 more poets to come live inside me.
So 9 p.m. Saturday night, Valentine's Eve. Great thing to check out with your love.
Yes, or you're someone that you want to be your love, because it'll get you kinky. It'll get you in the mood.
Yeah.
Or yourself.
That could be your first date, is you're going to go to our Twitch together.
Or treat yourself. And treat yourself. You'll feel good about it.
Yeah. And I'll be in the chat. Maybe I'll drop some lyrical.
Again, if you have themes you want, slide into our DMs. We may or may not do them. We come up with them on the fly.
All right. We're gonna play it out with Sonnet 18.
Oh yes.
Come on, speaker.
Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Thou art more lovely
Or temperate.
Okay.
Rough winds do shake the darling buds of May. and summer's lease hath all too short a date.
Oh my gosh, these roses are like a green
Sometime
screen.
too hot the eye of heaven shines, and often is his gold complexion dimmed.
What a great way to say
And every
sometimes the sun
fair
is
from
too
fair
hot.
sometime declines, by
I love
chance
sometimes
or
too.
nature's changing course untrimmed.
Yeah, summer's cool.
But thy
sometimes
eternal summer
no
shall
good.
not fade, nor lose possession
are
of that
always
fair thou owest. Nor shall
Show off
death
your
brag
cups.
thou wanderest in his shade, when in eternal
cups.
lines to time thou growst. So long as men can breathe or eyes can see, so long lives this, and this gives life to thee.
Poetic justice. You were so new to this life, but goddamn, you got adjusted. I mean, I write poems in these songs dedicated to the fun sex, your natural hair, and your soft skin, and your big ass and that sundress. Ooh, good God, what you doing that walk for? They say communication, say relations.
our modern
I can
day
tell, but I can never
Shakespeare?
write my poems unless I write them down for
Shakespeare?
real.
Oh, Drake's nice.
You can get it, you can get it, you can get it.
Some people think that he didn't write all his stuff too.
Those people are correct.
Bye. Oh, see you next week. We don't know what our theme is, but it's going to be great.
See you next week.